So if you want to avoid that and just say, no, I want people just to look at the books and everything and the phenomena that we've played pretty much the same way I would, and you're just kind of democratizing the process of scenario creation a little bit because it's fun for you and it is a different way of investing in what's going on than just playing your character. If that's what you're seeking, which it sounds like it kind of is, then why bother worrying about this accountant, you know, gained and spent column in the first place? And remember, everything I'm saying right here is assuming that we're keeping the structure right now of how you use the points to do it when you do it. I'm not arguing about that. That's its own mechanic, right? And just let it be. I'm not messing with that right now. So what are your thoughts?
Wow. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because I definitely want to move it away from this idea of like I gotta use this to my advantage. Like I want it to be something that's fun that we're doing it. Um, but just figuring out exactly how to structure that. Uh, it's good because in the game where we play in phases where it's like in the Doomsmith phase, they create the scenes and they're just throwing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I usually when it's a player's phase, then it's their turn to move. So all the bad guys who messed on you and sent assassins after you, now it's your turn to try to go get them back. That sort of thing. So I think it's yeah, just finding out how to do that. I think you make a very good point about the advantage versus democratizing that.
So again, the key to me is not how they get the points to do it, but just how do they get to use the points and have that be a fun thing in and of itself. And then the question of whether they, I mean, it's kind of nice sometimes to have boundaries on what you can do, and if you want to turn that into a points that sets those boundaries for how they do it, that's good. I mean, it's useful, right? It's a nice way for the players to say, well, okay, how many points are we doing on this? How many points do we have, to do this scenario? And that's not a bad thing to consider. Really look at your list. Player says, okay, I want to affect the upcoming scenario. How do I do it? I've got this many points. And so whatever that subroutine is for what they do with those points, that's where I think you need to be looking. And then you can say to yourself, how many points do they have at any given time? Am I really treating this as expenditure in terms of using them up? Or is it not a matter of expenditure at all? This is just saying the extent to which you can do it, and you just tell me when you want to do it. And that's good. There's something to be said for not mechanizing or over purposing certain things.
Right.
And they can still be quantitative, but the desire to turn it into some sort of physiological diagram where if you have this much carbon dioxide in your blood, then this much gets turned into bicarbonate, and gets filtered through your kidneys, and this much, is. But if it drops too much, then your heart rate drops, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you breathe faster, so then you end up with more carbon dioxide in your blood. There's a diagram for this, incidentally. You may be interested in, heart rate, and breathing rate, and bicarbonate levels, and kidney function. And there's a little diagram that you learn. But there's not everything in role playing has to be set up for such a diagram. Not if do we have to have absolutely everything be subject to homeostatic regulation? The answer is no. No, it doesn't have to be.
I think that's a problem of mine. I think you hit on that, and it makes me like dawns on me. I feel like that's part of how I design how I think. I get, very hog and gear, like trying to make everything, you know.
There's such a thing as a soft touch here and there on certain functions, and I am quite fond of my diagrams. You can look at Adept's Play and see all this stuff about system diagrams. But one of the things that's hardest to teach about my system diagrams is no, you cannot hook together every single system diagram for a game and end up with the grand mechanism of the game. That's not actually how they work. And it takes a while for somebody to realize that because they kind of want it to, right? They want the whole thing to be a grand, a grand diagram of play itself. And the sort of IT or engineering school of thought, right, kind of wants it to do that, and to show that it's impossible, and that if you do that, you're going to end up with a widget that plays itself. Then anyway, we can talk more about that later at some point if you're interested in those diagramming techniques. Because they're awfully cool, but they definitely operate on sectors of rules, not on the whole of play. And they often operate at angles toward one another that are not easily diagrammed with just two-dimensional or simple quantities. So, therefore, let's think about this. If we just take the advancement side of things, and you are spending points and improving, are you pretty happy with what you see in that regard when you look at the character from here to there? And remember, we're not just talking about hands dice. We're talking about things like blights and things like, shades and things like, the character's position in the world. Are they chained to an oar now? They weren't before, now they are, right? All those things. I mean, are you pretty happy with looking back on the history of characters and saying, that works pretty well. I'm all right with that. We can see the dude change as the time goes by, and it plays real well at the end. Plays real well on the far end. It plays real well on the near end. The trajectory of change is satisfying in a sense of we played this and it happened. Mm-hmm. How is that looking to you right now, viewed in isolation?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
Pretty good.
Let's not mess with
maybe a little tweak here and there, but
of course. But you know what? You're going to have to you're going to have to let go sooner or later, right?
Right. Yeah.
But okay. But that's fine. That's a perfectly good attitude to have toward it. You're like, okay, that's working. There's nothing, to mess with there, in any major way. Looking at that, then we, sort of give it a pat on the head, and then turn and look at the scenario creation stuff. You already talked about it as phases. So you've already got organization of when the players can contribute to scenarios and their setups, shall we say, to preparation. Right. You've already got phases to do that, right? So why not take what you think is a reasonable amount of points to do that with, and just say, okay, start of the phase, here are your points. And if you want structure to how those points may increase or diminish or anything like that, just build that, but don't tie it to earning them in play itself. Build whatever structure you want. I mean, it could be the same forever. I don't know. Or it could change. I don't know. That's something we don't know. But that way, you can focus on how those points are spent and when it's fun for people to do it. And who knows, maybe that group that you're talking about actually would do it then.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, if there's nothing to be gained by it except that, oh, hey, I want to play, at that spot. I really want to play at that spot with that, the zombie queen. She was kind of hot, Let's
Mhm.
I want the zombie queen back.
Yeah.
That sort of thing is much more satisfying than this notion of how do I spend this toward my advantage by making problems for myself. It's kind of contradictory, and people start getting sort of, they either rightly avoid that or they start getting weirdly abusive or defensive about it.
Got it. Got it.
So
Makes
that's
sense.
that's kind of all that I have in mind for the advancement issue, actually.
Well, and I think you give me a lot. Um, it's really good. It's really good. It'll be
Mm-hmm.
going over my brain
Excellent.
the
Well,
next
yeah,
couple of days. Yeah, yeah.
if you've got that going on, you can feel it happening in your head, then we're good here. I do have another interesting question about the changes in a character and the whole of play. How much play have you done at the very darkened end of the spectrum? How much play have you done where things are pretty bleak and characters of a wide range of shades, including the most shaded, and the world is definitely seriously darkened? How much have you played
Um,
much there?
yeah. Well, I would say because there have been times where we kind of like skipped ahead,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to get there. So I would say a fair amount.
That's good
A
because
fair amount.
that's one of the difficulties we find as well in a lot of games, especially those with a fairly uh, okay, especially those with any sort of fairly forward-moving advancement mechanic. Is that we often find that the authors kept play testing it from the beginning over and over and over. So all of their sort of nuts and bolts skirmishy stuff is pretty well in place, and all of um, their basics are well in place, and they've got this mechanism, to improve, but they haven't played through enough, so they don't know how all of their mechanics and experiences of play have changed. They just sort of assume that it's a linear build, but that's not. I mean, role playing games have more than just an X and a Y. So therefore, when you have things get improved and improved and improved, you're not going to get a linear. You're not going to get a line. You're going to get often this boom, and in some cases, I think the authors regard that with a certain amount of terror, and they never go there. So the game will take play there, but they've never gone, and
Yeah.
so it's something that makes me interested, because your game does have so much change for the world, um, that it's important for you to have a very hands-on understanding of what it's like to play when you get there. The There's also, I mean, the question of all those different variables about the characters. If you play for that long without skipping ahead, do you end up with characters whose social position has changed dramatically? Either they have very high status, or they have very low status, or they have, importance to certain entities and not to other entities. Um, so that you are arguably playing Elric during the final novel, Stormbringer. That's
Yeah.
where he's got very specific relationships to very specific earthly and non-earthly powers. Um, and obviously dramatically changed from his initial status.
Mhm.
Um, that's something that role players, especially fantasy role players, dream of. But in many cases, they find themselves either never getting there or distracted by other quantitative dynamics of play. Or the game master basically just says, well, okay, they just kind of make it that way so that we can play that stuff. To actually get there through play and have play continue to be dynamically rewarding, and also have a sense of this is how it's turned out, and we've ended up with these relationships to all these entities and these powers that we didn't have before, and all that stuff. And you look back on play and you can see how you got here. That is not as common as we would like, I think. It's sort of a shame that it's not as common as we would like.
Yeah.
So I can think of a few games that I'm quite happy with as far as that's concerned, but they aren't that many. So it would be a lot of fun to experience that with your game. Even the way that I first encountered it, the scope of the vision for that was very clear, right? To want to be doing that sort of thing. And not just because the characters are super badass. I mean, if you look at Conan in the stories that are set late in the character's chronology, written by Howard, being a king sucks. He spends a lot of time losing battles and being in the dungeons of other kings, for example.
Yeah.
And nobody can say Elric has an easy life in that novel, Stormbringer. So the notion of the power fantasy that our characters are enormous and can kick everybody's ass and stalk about being badasses, that's not really what you're talking about. You're talking about, yes, there's much more power being thrown around per character, and yes, they have all these different things going on in life, but the world is apocalyptic, and we have problems worthy of such characters, right?
Yeah.
And to do that without merely bloating everything. Well, before I had 10 hit points, now I have 1,000. Before the monsters had 10 hit points, and now the monsters have 1,000. That's not really much of a change, is it?
Right.
So the idea, that's one of the reasons why I'm looking across these different aspects of the characters, not just how big the hand dice are. Right. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at for this topic.
Good. Yeah, well, you definitely give me tons to consider.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to I talked a little bit about that, writing on a document, and I know you've been really busy in the intervening week, but when and if you have sort of a non-manuscript, written for yourself only set of playable rules, incomplete as they may be here and there, who knows? Maybe more complete than you might imagine, once you start dissecting them out from all of their framing text. You can count me in on wanting to play this thing.
Well, great. I would absolutely love that.
Set up a game, and I'm kind of all about playing characters these days, right now.
Okay.
So playing it as a character in a game of yours would be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I would love that.
Excellent.
So then what I'll do is, let me work up some of this stuff. We'll get it going, because I think I want to process this because I think you've hit on some really important stuff that I need to lock down a little bit, at least,
Mm-hmm.
a rough draft to give it a shot. And then, and then we could get a game going.
Excellent. All right, Jeff, I'll see you later.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Take care.